for space station automation is a lot better to do well understood repetitive tasks that are susceptible to human error. But it is not, automation is not good to do things that are not well understood. Because obviously someone's got to build the code to do the automation. If how a particular piece of hardware starts up or shuts down is not well understood, or it's just finicky, like we talked a lot about Cedra earlier, it's probably not a good candidate for automation. What's going to happen is that you're going to put together a piece of code and it's not going to do the job that you wanted. So you really want to focus on tasks that are well understood. On the flip side of that, on space station, there's some things that we probably should have used automation for that we didn't. We had a lot of procedures, both that the crew uses and the ground uses, where you're just sending strings of commands to the vehicle, and you're having a person push a button every time. Well, that's clearly something that you ought to be looking at automating. And on space station, what we did do is, on the ground side, we built an ability to have kind of software scripts that run in the control center that just run these strings of commands. We also had some software on board the vehicle called Timeliner that the payloads community in particular was pretty good at putting in automation for activating payload racks and shutting them down. That was a well understood function. And I think the key there is that you want to devote it towards things that are well understood, and you also want to think about putting infrastructure in place. Like on ISS, we have this Timeliner scripting language that allows the operations community to build automation scripts as they learn how to run the vehicle and put them on board. On the flip side of that, there's some things that maybe you don't want to be using automation for. We had there's a piece of software on board space station it's a software mode. It's called Assured Safe Crew Return. And the whole idea it's brought over from Freedom. The whole idea is that you hit one button, the crew would, and the vehicle would automatically configure itself to get ready to basically allow the crew to undock and return home. That is an extremely complicated set of commands and procedures that involve things like maneuvering the vehicle to a certain attitude, which is different depending on where the Soyuz rescue vehicle is docked. It depends on positioning the solar arrays a certain way, which changes depending on what kind of thruster configure you're set up. And there's almost an infinite number of variables and knobs to turn to do that. And of course we can quickly undock a Soyuz, but it does require some humans in the loop to make some decisions based on what the configuration of the vehicle is and sort of what the situation is that required you to undock. But we did have this mode that at the time seemed like a good idea to do Assured Safe Crew Return. The requirement was there. We coded it. We spent money doing it. I think the developers really struggled to come up with anything because the people writing that element of the software don't really understand completely how to undock a Soyuz. No one at NASA does because it's a Russian vehicle. And so we've had this piece of code in there for many years now, and we always debate actually just removing it, which would cost some money. But it's really kind of a good example of where you want to be really careful about trying to automate it, a really complex task that isn't really well understood, especially up front when you're starting a program.